You're listening to Feathers, a podcast of stories of women walking in faith. I hope these stories inspire you and encourage you to take flight in your own faith. I'm your host, Amy Bennett, and this is Season 6, Episode 8. Feathers is an outreach of Abiding Ministries. Find more encouragement at abidingministries.net. Well, hey friend, I am so glad you're here today. I am really excited about today's guest. So let me give you a little background before we start. The past few years, God has just really been dealing with me and my identity and really just shaving away anything that was not the truth of who I am in Christ and anything that holds me back from doing what He wants me to do. And it's been sort of like peeling an onion and getting through all of these layers. Well, over the years, I've heard about this personality type system called the Enneagram. And for those of you not looking at it, it is Enneagram, Enneagram. So the Enneagram is a typing system that helps you understand yourself and helps you understand others better. And it not only looks at what you do, but why you do it. And it can really help you get past hurdles that maybe you've dealt with your whole life and not really understand why you keep doing the same things over and over. And what I love most about it is if you look at it from a Christian perspective, it's really that the gospel helps you get over those hurdles. The system just kind of helps you put it in a specific language that you can understand. So anyway, the past few months I kept feeling like I needed to dig into this more, but could not figure out my type. So I ended up hiring a coach and then doing several coaching sessions with her. And it was amazing how I could look back on my life and see a trend of me doing things, the same thing over and over again. But more than that, I saw the gospel in a way that I had never before. And it's really helped me in so many areas of my life, just seeing that. But one in particular is actually launching the new Abiding Ministries. I really don't know if I could have launched that had I not learned the Enneagram and understood myself a little bit better and really been a little more secure in my identity in Christ through that. So all that to say, I have invited my coach, Beth McCord, on today to talk about the Enneagram. She has herself launched her own coaching business and recently some online courses, and really has been able to do that because of how she understands herself and the gospel through the Enneagram. So I want to give you some insight into that journey she's been on and really just bring you some awareness to this tool. So maybe it can help you grow in your spiritual walk, and specifically how it relates to this podcast, maybe it's just what you need to be able to have to go to that next thing that God is calling you to. All right, so we will talk so much more about it today in the episode, so let's go ahead and get started. Here is my conversation with Beth McCord. Well, hey, Beth, and welcome to Feathers today.
Hey, Amy, how are you?
I am doing great. I'm so excited to have you on my podcast today. How about we start out? You can introduce yourself and your family.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm Beth McCord, and I live in Nashville, Tennessee, or just a suburb outside of Nashville. My husband, Jeff McCord, is a pastor here in town, and I have two teenagers, an 18-year-old son, Nathan, and a daughter, Libby. She's 16.
Okay, so I visited Nashville last year. I've actually been a couple times. So I went for the Looking for Lovely weekend with Annie Downs.
Yeah.
Nashville. And I just saw she opened up registration for this summer, but I don't think the dates are going to work out.
Oh, no. That's too bad, because that would be awesome to invite you here and see you even more.
I know. And I'm thinking maybe I can make it work. We'll have to see.
Yeah.
We'll have to see, because that was so much fun.
Yeah, Annie's awesome.
Yep. All right. Well, I wanted to bring you on this podcast because you and I, you're an Enneagram coach, and you and I have worked together over the past couple months, and it has been truly life-changing, and it has been so helpful in my spiritual walk and with the things that God has been asking me to do over the past months. And I can just see, I know Enneagram is sort of like gaining popularity in the Christian world. Although for many people, I say it in real life and they're like, the Ennie what did you just say? They have no idea. So it's called the Enneagram, and it's, I guess you could say, personality typing system, but it's been just really, really good for me. I know for me, it's just been, I have seen and understood the gospel in a way I have never understood it in the past, 30 something years of being a Christian. There was a way that the Enneagram was able to, shine a light on it.
Right.
That was specific to the way my brain works and the way my brain understands.
Right.
And it has just drawn me closer and closer to the Lord, and just helped me with my identity, helped me in my boldness. It's relieved some of my fears, and it's an ongoing thing. It's like going to another level and then living from a different level. And so you are doing this coaching. You've got a new online course out, and I would love, for the people who don't know the Enneagram, have no idea what I'm talking about right now, if you can start out just giving kind of a high level overview of the Enneagram, but then I just would love to hear the story, because I know it's really been a faith walk for you to actually branch out and do the coaching and do the online course and all of this stuff. So I kind of want to talk about your journey too, and even how the Enneagram has helped you. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, so just to kind of help people understand the Enneagram, Ennea in Greek means 9 and gram means diagram. And if you were to see the symbol, it kind of looks like a 9-pointed star. And those points represent 9 basic personality types. And then the lines, just like a star has lines, the lines go from point to point, and those are paths that we take in our personality, whether it's under stress or growth. And so the Enneagram is really just a 9 personality typology. But the amazing thing about it is, if we kind of think of it in this way, is that it is our internal GPS. So back in the day, they would say it's a map. Well, now we use GPSs. We don't use maps. And it really is that, because when you find your personality type, and they go by names, but mainly we use numbers. So 1 through 9. When you know your number, then you can see if you are on your best path or if you are veering off course and going to fall into one of those many ditches that we keep falling in year after year, month after month. And the Enneagram really is that rumble strip on the highway that alerts you that you're veering off, and that if you keep going, you're going to be in that ditch. So, like for my personality, I might tend to not think much of myself. And so I'm going to veer off course and kind of hide or not be more bold in certain aspects. Well, the Enneagram wakes me up. It's that rumble strip that says, no, your presence matters. And here's the better course. So get back on track and let's go down the healthier destination for you. So the Enneagram by itself is not Christian or New Age of anything like that, but it does help us to know what is our best destination and how to steer away from our pitfalls. But not only that, it can also help us to know our family and our friends and who they are, so that we can have better communication and understanding of them. Because a lot of times we view life as if the way we see it is the real way. And why is anyone different? Why does our spouse look at life differently? Why does our kids look at life differently? Don't they know that the way I see it's the right way? Is really how we're typically wired. But the Enneagram, another way of looking at it is that if you have 9 different glasses or sunglasses, and they all have different colors of shades of lenses. So you got red and blue and purple and so on and so forth. Each of us fundamentally see the world from different perspectives, and we interact with each other from the perspective that we have. So, Amy, you and I have different Enneagram types. And so if I'm seeing the world through a blue lens and you're seeing it through a green lens, then I'm kind of thinking, Amy, why don't you see it the way I see it? Well, then if I'm able to put on your green lens, it's like, oh my gosh, now I understand why you think and feel and behave in the particular ways you do, because you're fundamentally seeing the world from a whole different perspective. So as an Enneagram coach, my first goal is just to help people to see how they view the world and why they think, feel, and behave in very particular ways. But beyond that, I really bring in the gospel so that they hear the message of the gospel from their personality's perspective. So it goes deeper and richer, and it brings real transformation that people just never thought was possible. So that's kind of a big overview of the Enneagram as a whole. So if we just think of it as a GPS system that's trying to keep you on your best destination, that's really what the Enneagram is all about.
Yeah, that was really good for me, is because I kind of knew beforehand when I was in a bad spot. I worried a lot, looking at other people and comparing myself a lot. And so that's really and what I really liked is to think about it as the levels. I know you're saying GPS, but it's like the unhealthy level, your average level, and then your healthy level. So, and you travel up and down that all the time, but you want to, the way you explained it to me is you kind of want to remain in some sort of healthy, range most of the time. So what's been good for me is to really be able to have words for that and be able to see myself. That's that rumble strip that you're talking about. Like if somebody else describing how I am when I'm unhealthy, and I can see myself in that. And that was one of the really good exercises that we did, is to actually write down, what has Amy been like when she's unhealthy? What is Amy like when she's average, in the average range? And what do I look like healthy? And that's that rumble strip that you're talking about. And when I see myself dipping into that, then that's that GPS. Like I know where to point myself to get back up to kind of those healthy levels.
Right.
And I love too that you talk about just others. I know for me, my husband is a totally different type. He's an 8, I'm a 3, and I at times couldn't really understand, like, why are you getting so angry? And so, and the things that would set him off, I couldn't really understand it. But when I can see his personality and what is their core fears and what they're really after, then I can have a little bit more compassion for him and really understand where he's coming from. It's not that I really get angry too because he's angry, but I do understand maybe why he is feeling fearful or why he's getting more upset than I am. And so I think it does give you a compassion for other people around you. So,
and a way to find, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, for those that are out there and they might, Google the Enneagram or go to my website, yourenneagramuniversity.com, they might be thinking, well, how do I find my type? Well, there's an assessment, but what I would say beyond the assessment is look at all the types and you're wanting to find your core fear and your core desire, because that is why we do what we do. So each of us has everything that we're thinking, feeling, and doing. We're trying so hard to run away from this core fear we have, and we're trying to obtain a core desire. So if we can find that on the Enneagram, which is on all the types on my website, talk specifically about what the core fear and the core desire is for each type on the type pages. When you see that and you find yours, it's like a little bit kind of like, how does someone know my internal diary? It's a little bit unsettling at first, a little bit exposing. But if you're able to then kind of rest in the fact that you are known, but you're mainly known by the Father who loves you and cares for you, and he has already set you free to go to the healthier levels, to feel that you're beloved in him, then we're able to know, oh, I am his beloved. And so because of that, and I'm safe in Christ, I can see where I'm at any level because my relationship status with him has not changed. And therefore, oh, I'm having a hard day today doesn't mean that we condemn ourselves or bring shame. That's been taken care of by Christ. What we can do now is see where we're at, give it back up to him, and ask him to bring the change that our personality needs to be more free into living out that we're beloved in him.
Yeah, that's the part that I really liked, is that this is not really a Christian thing per se, but the gospel answers the problems for all of us. The gospel calms the fears. The gospel meets our desires. And when we do look at it and take it from a Christian perspective, like I said, we understand the gospel more, we can apply the gospel more in our lives, and I think it just gives us a richer, deeper relationship with God.
Yep, exactly. And that's my whole point is, an Enneagram coach most of them will not bring the gospel in. As a pastor's wife, my husband and I have used this for 15 years in our marriage and our parenting, but also in just discipling others in the church. And so what I realized for myself was I had a great gift that God has given me in understanding all the types. I'm a type 9, and type 9s can almost feel and understand all the other types better than they even know themselves, because we tend to merge with other people to get along so that we don't have conflict. Well, obviously that can be a detriment if that's the way I live completely. But if I use it as a gift and I can sit down with people and see and feel and kind of know where they're at from their vantage point, then I can bring the gospel to them in a fresh way that really resonates with their personality type. And so because of that gift, I realized I need to, get out there and launch this Enneagram coaching business, because by me being a 9 and kind of, the thoughts that run in our mind is my presence doesn't matter. My voice doesn't matter. I don't want to make a big deal of myself. I'll let everyone else lead. What I realized by doing that is that I'm not only harming others, but I'm also harming myself. But above all that, I am not giving glory to God in the way He's gifted me. So part of my growth path as a type 9 is moving to what's called the healthier high side of type 3. And this all has to do with that GPS map and how the lines connect that you and I worked through. But for me, it's getting out there and showing people my value and my worth and how God has created me. It's not a vain thing. It's not an arrogant thing. It is God has really gifted me in a very specific way, and I'm going to present it to the world. Now, for type 9, that's a really hard thing to do, whereas for some types, that's an easy thing to do. And so I've had to trust the Lord and kind of submit to Him, knowing that He is going to bless others through me, even when it's hard. But when He has done that, especially like working with you, Amy, it's just such a wonderful experience to sit with my clients and literally watch them transform right before my eyes week after week, and to see the gospel melt them, not me, but, God working in and through me. And it's just like the most transformative time for my clients, but also myself. And so for me as a type 9, I'm still striving to do the Lord's work in the way He has called me to do it. Now, like when we work together, since you're a type 3 and I'm a type 9, obviously the advice that I want to give you is not the same advice that I should give myself, because what the advice I give myself doesn't fit you. And so as an Enneagram coach, and actually when I work with counselors or other mentors or pastors, I'm really trying to help them to understand that they usually are giving advice through their personality perspective to the other person. And that's not really what we want. We want them to understand the other person so that they can give the advice that helps that person right where they're at from their personality vantage point. And I think that's kind of what we really enjoyed together. Is it was kind of a two-way street. Like I would share some of my stuff and you would share some of your stuff, and we would then kind of work through this together, because, life's messy and there are things that get us tripped up all the time. And as a coach, I'm here to kind of say, hey, I've kind of been down this path. Let me kind of show you how to bring the gospel into your everyday life by understanding why you do what you do. And I think that was just such a beautiful thing for us to have that experience together.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I would love for you to share what you were sharing earlier about, and I think it's so good, is that the advice that you would give to one person could actually be detrimental to another person.
Right. Exactly.
So for me, that's like an achiever, performer, and I want to have my to-do list and get it all done because I believe that's how I'm valued. That if I don't do all the things, then people are going to think I'm worthless and don't want to be around me.
Exactly.
So I have to learn to just be and just to look to God for my to-do list, not people, and to do that out of a loving relationship with Him, not with this striving for people's pleasure. So yeah, talk about how the advice that you would give for me could be detrimental.
Yeah. So yeah, we were talking about that is in launching your awesome new product, if I were to say, okay, Amy, now I want you to be more motivated and I want you to have a longer to-do list. And here's all the things you could be doing to make it, go gangbusters and this, that, and the other. That actually wouldn't be the best advice for you because you're already in that space. And in fact, that is sometimes the thing that can trip you up from experiencing the richness of the gospel and the freedom that we're really wanting you to experience. Because each of us are in a box. So a lot of people are like, I don't want to be labeled or typed or whatever. And I'm like, well, I understand that. But the thing is that you have a personality and you're already in a box. Our personality, we use our personality to protect ourselves from this core fear and to obtain the core desire. But the gospel is what frees us from this box so that we can experience a higher place, our true self, our redeemed self in Christ. So for you, it's not that I should say, go work harder or have a longer to-do list or you should do this, that, and the other. For me to talk to you specifically, it was more about, I want you to rest. Now, you're still going to be working. It's not saying you should sit down and not do anything and it magically appears. It's while you're working, while you're doing, while you're checking things off the list. For a type 3, we want them to learn how to be, to know that your value is not dictated on how many sales you have, how well the launch goes, are people listening to your podcast or not. Your value is in who you are in Christ. Now, that's true for everyone, but the core fear of the 3 is that they are not valued. They're not. You're a failure. You aren't admired. And so it's like, oh my gosh, I can't have that happen. Well, the thing is that for a type 3, the message that we want them to hear is that you are loved for just being you. You don't have to perform or achieve to receive God's love. And that's the message that type 3s are wanting to hear from everyone. The thing is that anyone could really say it to you, but it's not going to manifest deeply unless it's God's message to you. So your husband can say it, and it will mean a lot to you if he were to say that, but it's not going to heal your heart the same way that the gospel will from that message.
Well, I think, and just to jump in there, and the reason for me that is because as an achiever or / a performer is that you know how to hide. Right. You don't want people to see. But with God, you can't hide anything. And he knows you inside and out. And so when he says it and you know that he knows everything and sees everything, then it means more.
Exactly. And that's just the beauty of it. But so for let's say the type 1 are called the moral perfectionist. And their fear is to be evil, corruptible, wrong, bad. So it's more of an ethical thing. So that's why they're kind of called perfectionists. But we're all perfectionists, but from our own vantage point. These are the ones that really, it's about morality and ethics and doing the right thing. It's not about appearance or image they can be successful, but it's not about that kind of an image. And so for the type 1s, if I'm encouraging them to do the right thing and to, make sure that everything is just perfect and, here's how you do it. Cause that's what they'll come, to me kind of wanting me to kind of help them to be this perfect image or not image, but person and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, no, that's not the message that they need to hear. What they need, so the message they long to hear is that they are good. So they've looked from their parents and other people to somehow affirm in them that they're good, that they're doing good work, an ethically good thing. Well, I could say it all day long to a type 1, but what I really need them to understand is that because of Christ's perfect life, his death and his resurrection, and that being put on the believer, the type 1 believer, they are good. It's because Christ was good, not because they are good. It's because Christ's righteousness is now in them and on them, so that when God sees them, even though they make mistakes, because even our good works are like filthy rags, when God sees them, he sees they are good because Christ's righteousness is in them. And when they are able to fully embrace that, it's not that all of a sudden they're not a type 1 anymore, but they're able to have a lot more freedom. They're letting go of this personality constraint so that they can have more joy and more grace and spontaneity and playfulness that they've ever had before. But again, that message wouldn't resonate with some of the other types. And so it's really understanding what are the core fears and the core desires, and how do we go about using our personality strategies to try to get what we want, but we actually sabotage ourselves in the process because we're trying to do it in our own way, in our own strength, versus living out the truth of the gospel. And that's where I come in as a coach, is bringing in the truth of the gospel for that specific person's personality type.
Well, we've mentioned a couple of these. You just did type 1. So why don't we go ahead and take just a few minutes and go through the 9 types. I know people must be curious if they haven't heard of what their type might be. Exactly. So let's cycle through the 9 real quick and see if you maybe something will resonate with people as listen.
That sounds
as they good. Listen.
So, as I mentioned, type 1 is the moral perfectionist. Their core fears being bad, evil, corruptible, wrong, and they desire to be good, ethical, right. The type 2 is the supportive advisor. And different teachers, let me just say this, different teachers have different names, and we really don't go by the names very much, any of us. We go by the numbers because that's neutral. Because we don't want a bias to come up in people's minds like, oh, I like that name, or oh, that person scares me because of that name. So I'll say the names, but we really just go by the numbers. So again, type 2 is the supportive advisor, and they fear not being loved and wanted. And their core desire is to be loved and wanted. And so what the type 2s will do, they will do a lot of helpful things because they fear that if they aren't helpful or supportive or caring, that you won't love them. And so they're striving to earn people's love and appreciation through giving, whether it's gifts or works of service and stuff like that. Now the type 3, which is for you, is the successful achiever. And their core fears being a failure, not achieving, being incompetent, being worthless, inefficient. And they really desire to be loved for just being themselves, to be seen as respectable, to be admired. So with the type 3, my message to them is always, you are loved by just being. So a lot of it in so many types is this way, the Martha versus the Mary, but learning how to be versus doing is a really big thing for the type 3. Now the type 4 is the romantic individualist. They fear being boring, mundane, like everyone else, so common. They fear being defective and flawed. So inside them, they kind of feel like everyone else has, let's say if you're a puzzle, the type 4s think that they're missing a very important piece of the puzzle, but everyone else is fine. So when they look at other people, they envy their complete, beautiful whole puzzle, and they're striving to find their uniqueness so that they can present it to the world to be loved. And so they will have something that's different or unique about them, that's special just to them, to present to the world. And so my message to them from the gospel is that they are unique and special, but there is nothing defective and flawed in them, that they were created, perfectly by their creator and loved just the way they are, and they're seen for just who they are. Now the type 5 is the investigative thinker, and they fear being incompetent or incapable. And so they're constantly striving to gain more knowledge. They're the types of people that will, learn about everything, even if it's a little bit about everything. And then they usually also specialize in one key subject, and they become very expert in that area. But they also fear being intruded on, having obligation, and they fear that having too much interaction with people will deplete them so much that it's almost like they'll be annihilated. So they have a real sensitivity to interaction with people and having to manage their inner resources. So think about them as like a phone that has a really low ability to charge for a long period of time. You know how like when you have those phones and you're like, oh my gosh, I have like an hour, and then I have to plug in, and then you're good for another hour, and then you have to go plug in. That's kind of how they feel internally when they're with people. They need to know that they're going to have some time to get away to recharge. And it's much more intense than just the average introvert. This really has to do with an internal resource depletion. But for them, what I would say is that God is their safe place He's the one that can recharge them. He is the one that will give them the ability to have the competence and the knowledge that they need to be secure, to feel secure in the world. And that for them, they're more competent than they'll ever even imagine. Now, the type 6 is the loyal guardian. They're loyal, faithful, dutiful, responsible. They fear, though, that they're not going to have the support and security and guidance that they so long for. And so they're constantly looking to others for encouragement or affirmation in the sense of, yes, here's the direction you should go. Here's the guidance you should have. So they struggle a lot with internal doubt. Now, for me as a coach, what I would say to type 6s is that you have so much good discernment because they're kind of worst case scenario thinkers. They're constantly surveying what could go wrong. And they've done it for so long. They actually are really good at discerning what things to steer clear of. But the thing is they don't really trust their inner voice, their true inner voice. So what I try to help them with is two things: is one, obviously listening to the Holy Spirit, but also trusting that God has given them so much insight and discernment that they really need to start trusting themselves to make the right decisions. The type 7 is the entertaining optimist, and they fear being bored, trapped in emotional pain. They fear, internal anxiety, people kind of diving in deep and kind of dealing with all of the internal world stuff that could be negative. So because of that, they desire to go out and to have fun and stimulation and excitement. But so for me, what I would suggest for the type 7 is that I need them to pull back and to have silence and solitude in their way. It doesn't have to be like everyone else, but to savor life and to savor their relationship with the Lord, to be able to go inward and to see that God has so many wonderful things that they can access that seem fearful, but actually brings really a deep, rich sense of life that they haven't tapped into yet. So a good example with this is Joy in the movie Inside Out, where at the end, Joy learns that the beauty of life is the combination of all the emotions. Joy and sorrow see that they need each other. And so that's where I would bring a 7, is to enjoy the richness of all of life. Now the type 8, they're the protective guardian. I'm sorry, I blanked. What do I call them? Protective challenger. There we go. They are fearful of being harmed, controlled, challenged, weak, and at the mercy of injustice. And their main desire is just to protect themselves. So these types can present to be very blunt, bold, strong. They say it like it is, kind of, get out of their way at times. The thing is that they're really tender inside. And what they need is they need us to come along and say, the gospel message to you is that God will not betray you. And in fact, not only will he not betray you, but he has come to save you and to protect you. And he is your refuge and your strength. And when an 8 understands that message, their heart is able to become more soft and warm and open. Now, last but not least, the type 9 is the peaceful mediator, and we fear conflict, we fear being overlooked, we fear being of no importance, insignificant. But the biggest thing I would say is being overlooked and in conflict, especially direct conflict at me. So what we desire is inner peace and stability. So we're constantly just wanting to have everyone in harmony and to feel good. So what we usually do is we merge with people and go along to get along. So we'll like other people's music, or we'll go to the restaurants they want to go to. But the problem with that is then we give off the persona or the thought that everyone else is more important than the 9, that we'll just do what you want, so that there's no discord. Well, the problem with that is it's not true. We are important, that we have great value. And so the message that I would give to the 9 is God sees you. Your presence matters. Your voice matters. And not only that, but it matters to the world, and that you need to get out there and present the great gifts that God has given you to everyone else so that everyone else is blessed in the process. So that's just a really quick overview of all 9 types.
Yeah, that was good. Thank you. That was a big mouthful. So I just had a couple things to say, because I'm thinking as you're going through this, like typing, because I'm sure people are trying to type themselves, one.
Right.
And so my comment, I just want to say about that, you talked about you have an assessment.
Yes.
On your site that you can do that. Now, there was a paid assessment that you had me do. I don't remember what organization that was through. But I actually came up with, I think I was really battling between the perfectionist, the 6, I don't know, what's the 6?
The loyal guardian.
The loyal guardian, because that has a lot of fear. I always think about fear, like they're always afraid of everything.
Yeah, right.
So, and I think my type actually said I was a 6 at the top, but it wasn't until, and I think part of the reason that I had reached out to you is because I really couldn't decide on a type for myself.
Yes.
Is that I kept going back and forth between these couple 3 or 4. I think a 9 might have been in there for me too, 1, 6, 3, 9. And really couldn't figure it out. And it wasn't until we did the coaching that we really landed on the 3. And I think even a couple weeks into our coaching, I was like, oh, that 1 is sounding a lot like me again. Right. Did we do this right?
Yes.
So typing can be a very difficult thing to do. And I think that's where a coach can come in.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's so many layers to the Enneagram. It can appear kind of simple. It's kind of, if you think about the gospel, we can say the gospel message in one verse, about being born again. But the Bible is so rich and complex. Now, obviously the Enneagram can't touch the gospel and the message, but the whole point in trying to show the example is that we can look at the Enneagram on a very kind of easy to understand scale. But the reason why you want to coach to help you type yourself, especially if, some people it's pretty obvious and they know right away. But some people, we use all 9 types, and it depends on the degree that you're using the other types that will bring confusion or clarity. And so having a coach that understands all the layers and the nuances to make sure you found your right type is so important, because remember the GPS analogy. So I'm in Nashville, and if I'm trying to get to you, in South Carolina, then if I put in coordinates from Chicago to South Carolina, that's not going to do me any good here in Nashville. And so that's what I want people to understand, is finding your main type is so important. And so like for you, Amy, I know the questions to ask you to make sure you're not a 3 versus a 1, because we do a lot of similar things. So for instance, someone could have their house clean, want their house clean as a type 1 because that is the right thing to do. Well, a type 3 might want to do it because of the appearance and looking like they've, checked off their list and they've got everything together. The type 6 might have a clean house because they're afraid of germs and maybe someone getting sick, or it's the faithful, the faithful, loyal thing to do. A type 9 might want to do it like myself. I want a clean home because then I have peace of mind. I can just sit back and relax, and there's nothing around me saying you need to do something. So we can all have the same outward appearance, but knowing why we do what we do is a much more complex thing. And so some of these assessments, even mine or any of them, even if you pay for them, it all comes down to, do you know yourself really well? And can you find yourself on the Enneagram? And so I would suggest that most people use a coach to make sure that they've found their correct type, so that they aren't misguided and then all of a sudden are on the wrong trajectory for their health and well-being.
Well, I think that's a hard thing to do, because at the beginning, you would say, well, why do you do that? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know.
I just do it.
I just do it. And it really takes some time, and it was very actually difficult work, like mental work because you kind of have to then start looking at yourself as you're living your life. Like, why did I just do that? What was my motivation for doing? Like, if I did just clean the house, why did I just do that?
Yes.
So I think it's a process. I don't think it's just a one-time, let's take a quiz and,
yes, right,
figure it out. I think it's really, you have to kind of live your life with eyes open and to trying to figure out. The other thing I wanted to talk about as far as typing is, I think probably as people are listening to the types is that they're typing other people in their heads and they're like, oh,
Right.
like that's my husband or that's, my mom or whatever. Now I knew right away that my husband was an 8.
Right.
But the rule is you're not supposed to type anybody because even though they have outward actions like we just talked about, they might be doing it for a totally different reason than you're thinking.
Exactly.
But I have heard the 8s are the easiest ones to spot because they are the blunt, the aggressor, they're going to tell you like it is. They really have nothing to hide. So they're probably the easiest to point out. But talk about why we shouldn't type people.
Even with the type 8, so my husband is what's called a counterphobic 6. And this, of course, gets into some of the deeper layers and stuff. But a counterphobic 6 actually looks like an 8. So they're still the more have anxiety, self-doubt. The phobic 6s succumb to that anxiety and will kind of back away from things out of fear. The counterphobic 6s move into the fear, kind of trying to prove themselves that they're not fearful. And so they can look very 8ish. And again, that's one reason why we don't want to label people, because it has to do with the internal why versus the external behavior. But like for you being the type 3, the successful achiever, there's a layer to the 3s that there's a type of 3 that can look very type 1ish because they're wanting to be good. This type 3 is wanting to be good, which can look very perfectionistic. The thing is again about their image versus just plainly doing what's right. So a type 1 typically is not looking to have a very successful or admirable image. They are just doing what is right, even if it's at the cost of what others think of them. So a lot of it just has to do with a coach having the right questions and listening to your story and being able to ask the question, okay, well, why did you do that? So then when you would say the answer, then I can kind of go, okay, that sounds more 3-ish than 1 or vice versa. And to kind of then navigate. So I'm not even telling you what type you are. I'm helping to guide you and for you to then go, oh yeah, this makes sense. This is my type. And so it's a process for some people. Like I said, like for your husband, it wasn't a process. And most 8s can see their number very clearly. Yep, that's me. And then there's other types that it's just a little bit harder. And that has to do with the layers and the dynamic. I would say type 6s and 9s also are the 2 hardest to find. The reason for 9s is that they merge with all the other types so that they can go along to get along and not have conflict. And so they can kind of take on different types. The 6, on the other hand, has a bunch of contradictions that are going on. They will say, well, it depends if I'm extrovert or introvert, or if I'm brave or if I'm fearful. So they can be both sides of a coin. It just will depend on their situation. So for them, they feel very torn in trying to find which number they are. So that's where, again, having a coach to kind of walk you through that to solidify what type you are is much more helpful than sometimes just trying to go it on your own.
Mm-hmm. The other thing I wanted to talk about around typing just quickly is that from a parent's perspective, in that, our kids' personality is actually still developing.
Right.
Because a lot of times these missing messages are really something we pick up in childhood, or don't pick up in childhood, I should say.
Yeah. Right.
But I think as our children get older, you've explained to me that you can kind of hold a couple different types maybe in your hand, but explain to me what should a parent do and what should they do with that information?
Yeah. So what I did, and I started the Enneagram with my kids about 12, 15 years ago. So my oldest is 18 and my daughter is 16 and a half, almost 17. And when they were younger and I was getting to know the Enneagram, I could eliminate certain types pretty easily because they weren't demonstrating any of the characteristics internally or externally. And that would leave me with about 2, 3, 4 numbers for each of them. And so what I did was I tried to just ask them over the course of years why they did what they did. But of course, they're kids, so they don't always know. but I would just try to see if I could gain any insight into their world. And then I would also deliver messages that each of the types that I thought they might be. So like the message that they long to hear, I would deliver those messages at different seasons to see which one might resonate with them more. So trying to kind of go the back door because they're just too young to really have them name anything, but just seeing where they blossom, how they're growing, and just being a student of my children, but not forcing anything on them. And then the main thing with working as a parent is if I work on myself, that's the biggest component in parenting because my kids will do things that kind of hit my hot buttons, but those are my hot buttons. They may have had no intention at all and no recollection I have these hot buttons. And I need to work on myself so that I have emotional sobriety in the gospel so that I can then parent them from a clear mind. But in saying that, when my kids were about 13, 14, 15 in that age range is when they were old enough. And of course, we've been talking about the Enneagram for many years. We were able to say, okay, let's sit down and really see if we can't find your main type in this area. So we would do kind of an assessment together, but I still was just cautious. Like, I don't want to solidify this too much until they are adamant this is my type. And so my daughter's a type 2, but I kind of thought she was either a 2 or a 9. So I was kind of batting between those two. And I actually thought she was probably more type 9 because we're very alike than type 2. But now that she's older, she's like, nope. And now I'm starting to see a lot more of the type 2 come out. Now my son, I batted around 1, 2, and 6. And I actually was thinking he was probably 1 or 2 more than the 6. Well, he ended up being a 6. And if you know the Enneagram, it makes sense. There's a lot of 6s that want to do what's right and follow the right system and not be blamed and targeted. So it can seem very one-ish, but they're also very warm and witty and fun and people-oriented. And so that makes a lot of sense with the type 2. But at the end of the day, he struggles with the self-doubt and wanting guidance and support and security. So all that to be said is, as a parent, just really hold these loosely and just be a good student of your child. But more importantly, be working on yourself, because that then will translate into your children having all the tools and the resources they need, no matter what type they are, to be a healthy version of their type.
Yeah, and I'll just plug that real quick. I mean, for me, having this fear of failure, it really translated to my children because when they weren't behaving correctly and I felt like they were failing, then that made me feel like a failure as a parent, and then I would totally lose it. Like, get yourself together. And like it caused this internal tension, and then our relationship suffered because they aren't meeting my needs of not feeling like a failure of a mom. And on in more than that, it was for them. It's like, don't be a failure because, then God might not love you or, or I just had such high standard. Yeah. So when I worked on myself, it helped the relationship with my kids and then helped me give my kids more grace. Because I could give myself more grace, because if we can't give it to ourselves, then we certainly can't give it to our kids. So I think it impacts so many different areas.
Yeah. So for the type 9, again, one of our core fears is being overlooked or not heard. And at the same time, we'll kind of overlook ourselves, but we really don't want to be overlooked by others. And so like when my kids, and all kids do this, when you tell them to do something and then they don't do it, I feel like I've been overlooked or not heard. Now, they may have just been childish, and not paying attention or being attentive right away. But now that they're older, they're like, Mom, we're not ever thinking that you're not important, or we're not trying to overlook you because we don't love you or we don't value you. That doesn't ever enter our mind. It's like, really? Because that record player in my mind as a type 9 is so loud and strong when I'm not taking care of it that I really think, oh, see, they think I don't matter. And then I get tripped up and my button, gets hit, and then I get upset or sad or whatever, the reaction is. Instead of having emotional sobriety and realizing that when that happens, if I understand why that's happening, I can then take a deep breath and bring the gospel to my mind and say, okay, even if my kids did disrespect me and did overlook me on purpose, my value still is in Christ, and I can rest in that instead of reacting. I can be more interactive with them and parenting them from a heart of love and grace and kindness versus a reaction of being hurt and dismissed and all those things. So it's a whole different ballgame. And again, the more we are healthy, the more we're going to be able to give all of those healthy tools to our children. And that's more important than just trying to change our children.
So good. Well, I hope people have seen Enneagram. I think it can help you with the things that God has called you to do, because you can rest in that. It can help you in the parenting. It can help you with all types of relationships with others. And I think that's just the real thing is it gives you eyes to see things that you couldn't before. And for me, it just is so much about replacing the lies with the truth. And it's
yes.
And whatever your lie is that you're believing, this helps you really recognize it and then continually applying that gospel truth, and helping you in all sorts of areas of your life.
Exactly.
So, with that, thank you so much. I mean, there's so much more that we could talk about with
right.
the Enneagram. I would love it if people could connect with you as a coach or taking your new course. Tell us a little bit more about that and where they can go.
Absolutely. Thanks. So what you and I did from the very beginning is we went through a private session where I walked you through the Enneagram, my Enneagram 101 presentation. We did that privately. But what I realized is that a lot of people don't have the time or the resources to hire me privately to sit one-on-one. Now, it's really wonderful because then you and I had a very rich interaction, and I still do that. The private sessions and walking people through the Enneagram, or I do it with groups over Zoom, which is like Skype. So I can do it with anyone, anywhere. In fact, I have some clients in different countries. But I also decided that I want everyone to be able to access that same material on an online course. And so if you go to yourenneagramuniversity.com and you go to the course page, you can find the Enneagram 101 course, and it's exactly what you and I went through, Amy. And it's broken down into 14 modules that are each about 10 minutes long on average. And they can walk through the whole Enneagram. Now, what people need to realize is the Enneagram is so complex that when you're reading it in the books, it's just like mind-boggling. But what I do is I bring it in a very easy to understand format so that people walk away with a very robust understanding of the Enneagram, but it was so simple. And not only that, they'll walk away with a 63-page downloadable workbook so that they can use that as an ongoing resource for them. Instead of having to go back to the videos all the time, they can use that to guide them in their own walk and also understanding other people. So that's Enneagram 101 on my course. But I also do individual coaching. So it's kind of like, okay, well, now I know I'm a 3 or a 4 or whatever the number is. What do I do with this now? And that's what you and I did, Amy, is we walked through Explore Your Type sessions, and there are 5 sessions, and I'm taking you through your whole personality in a bite-sized lessons and interaction. And the whole point is to bring the gospel to bear on all of these parts of your personality so that you experience the freedom and the richness that is already yours. We just don't know how to access it because of our personality getting in the way. So I would love to have as many clients because to me, this is the life change that they're really looking for. And it will change how they parent. It will change their relationship with their parents, their spouse, and their coworkers, and everyone involved. It's just that dynamic.
It is.
And so how to get in touch with me for that, you know, on my website, there's contact forms and stuff like that. But simply, it's Beth at yourenneagramcoach.com, and my coaching page is yourenneagramcoach.com. So I have 2. The online courses is yourenneagramuniversity.com, and my coaching site is yourenneagramcoach.com. But Beth at yourenneagramcoach.com is my email, and I would love to talk to anyone that's ready.
Yes, and I think that would be so great. I mean, again, it was just so good for me, and I hope other people will embrace the Enneagram and jump into the coaching. I just think it would be so revolutionary for anybody who would want to know more.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Yep. Well, thanks so much for taking the time with me today, Beth.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks for having me.
Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I just want to say thank you for letting me chat about myself a little bit more than I normally do. But I have just loved what the Enneagram has done in my life and really wanted to bring that to you. And I just hope today, there's no way that we talked about, everything that we can talk about with the Enneagram. What I hope today was it just whet your appetite. And that maybe if you've never heard of the Enneagram, that you might go take the assessment on her site. Or maybe if you've been batting around a couple of numbers, maybe you'll try some coaching with her or check out her new online course if you really want to dive into it. Beth has been a really great coach, a really great friend as we've walked through this. She's so non-judgmental, really can walk you through it with such grace. And you don't have to go. This was not a commercial for Beth. I just know that it's made a difference in my life and wanted to bring it to you. Maybe it could be helpful in your life and your spiritual walk and what God has for you to do and all of your relationships. I really believe it can make a difference. So with that, I just want to say thank you so much for listening again. And that will be it for this week, I think. So guys, we will see you next week on Feathers.